Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 1 of Podcasting with the Libertarian Party of India. In each episode, we'll ask ourselves 5 questions. We'll give solutions to common issues faced by people of India. We will also, delve into some of the basics of it, and as well, we'll drill down into the details of governance in India and the solutions that the Libertarian Party can offer. So, welcome to the Podcasting with the Libertarian Party of India. True freedom awaits. Let's get started. Our special guest for today is Tushar, who is a member of the My first question to you, Tushar, is what inspired you to be a part of the Libertarian Party of India?
Well, thank you, Anu, for inviting me. And I'll be as fast as I can be. So basically, there were 3 factors. First was I was into entrepreneurship, and from the childhood, my basic question was how can we improve society? And there were 2 main pathways. First was entrepreneurship. Second was politics. But eventually, I came to realize that politics isn't the way, and entrepreneurship is the solution. Then the second step of the evolution was me becoming a libertarian. Was someone has built an entire ideology around entrepreneurs and society. So naturally, that becomes an extension to my political evolution. And then the third aspect, which was the trigger point, was election of Argentinian President Javier Milei and the sliding of India into more and more freebies and socialism. So I figured out that the trajectory seems to be more tilted towards socialism, and I don't have the voice, and none of the establishment seems to ever going in that direction. So I decided that let's start another startup which is focused on changing the political landscape, discourse landscape for future of India. So,
One thing you said about Javier Milei, Finamo Burial, that was...
Yeah, definitely.
That was inspiring. It's an actual case study, right? I mean,
it was one of the most significant events of the current decade, and future generations this will definitely bring another trajectory to the history that was sliding towards more and more tyranny. It will have us break through that. No, someone took a different path.
This is completely out of left field. It's just out of the blue. So brings me to my second question for you. So how do you define libertarianism? What is this philosophy, and how is it actually different from political ideologies that we have today?
Basically, there are the current dichotomy is between conservative and liberal. Putting it simply, conservative is someone who is who believes in the continuation of tradition and is against innovation, and wants society to submit to tradition what is already going on. And liberal is someone who wants to break through in culture, but doesn't want any change in the human desires or something like that. Putting it simply, one is conservative and liberal are the 2 spectrums that currently the political discourse is operating on. None of them are believers in individual liberty. Both are more intended towards culture wars or collectivist issues. What libertarian proposes is that collectivist issues are irrelevant. What we believe is fundamental and absolute freedom in the pursuit of happiness. Putting it simply, the first line of the Constitution that United States proposed, that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Everyone is free to do that. That is essentially the libertarian motto, that every individual is free to pursue his life project, and the political structure needs to be designed in such a way that state or the government doesn't impede into it. It has responsibility to protect it. Although we can talk about the evolution that whether it actually does, or how there is a contradiction in this. Basically, fundamental belief is that full freedom to the individual in pursuit of his life project, with the limitation that he doesn't his project doesn't harm the life projects of others. So this is the core libertarian belief, and there may be different in how it actually manifests, that whether government is involved or not, minarchism or anarchism or anarcho-capitalism. These are level of gradations, but basic belief is that individual as an unit is essential, and he has desires, and he should be free to pursue those desires.
All right, great. So, what would the third question? So, what would the core principles, if you want to name like 2 or 3 principles as such that the party is built on, that the Libertarian Party of India is built on? What would you say they were?
The fundamental first principle is the non-aggression principle, that no action should be intended towards the first initiator of harm. There should be no initiation of harm. But this is the fundamental principle. But talking in terms of policy measures that what are bedrock policy formation policy what are our bedrock policies? So first one is decentralization, second one is no taxation, and third one is merit.
Third one is merit. Wow. Okay. All right. There is a growing concern about one thing you mentioned about individuals' freedom, right? There is a growing concern about. So, how do you address this balance between an individual's freedom and certain societal responsibilities that these individuals have? How don't they conflict? Like, how is that balance created between freedom and the responsibility?
First of all, there needs to be some balance regarding that. You can debate whether the degree to which, but where libertarianism comes into is that the government shouldn't be involved in enforcing these issues. It is up to civil and cultural institutions to decide what level of balance each different societies require. Which is basically bureaucrats and politicians, shouldn't get involved in solving these problems. This is where libertarianism is involved. But talking about whether this is a values debate, whether how much individual bears responsibility towards society, or how much society is responsible for the individual. These are cultural problems, and different culture will have different answers based on their geographical settings. It is my understanding. Principally, answers may vary, but my belief is that geography to a large extent determines social norms, and because primitive societies require much more collectivism as compared to advanced societies where individual can survive on their own. So the different gradations of technological development, social development vary the spectrum of individualism and collectivism. But one thing that needs to be absolute is that government, which is basically politicians and bureaucrats, won't be involved in deciding those norms.
Right. Something that you mentioned brings me to my fifth question of the episode 1 of this podcast. You said no taxation. How is that even possible? Like, what is going on? How can you run a country with no taxation? How does that work? And what are the alternatives if there's no taxation? How does this whole operation work?
So, what is basically taxation? If we break it down to first principle, and if we relate it to day-to-day activities, the basic problem of tax, the basic promise of taxation is that you give us money, we will give you protection, and now it has become protection and infrastructure like education, roads, etc. will in exchange. This is the basic promise. So, what actually ends up happening is that they are never. What has actually happened is that they haven't been able to deliver on either of these objectives, and now they have to rely on private funding for all of these infrastructure projects anyway. So the basic promise has been broken. Also, talking in more simplistic terms about taxation, so it is a subscription you cannot simply get out of. Yeah, and no one has. You cannot say that I opt out of my taxes. You may try to evade taxes and you may try to avoid taxes, but you simply cannot get out of the subscription. Taxation is basically a subscription that you cannot get out of. You may use a criminal mafia, that it is a mafia money that you need to exist in society. There is a meme that a man says to a chimpanzee that you are a stupid animal, and a chimpanzee says that you have to pay 30% of your income to live. Who is stupider? So this is basically taxation. And what is the counter to it? How will the question comes? If not taxation, then how will they operate? So it isn't, and this relates to what I am talking about. That since government doesn't collect enough taxation anyway, why bother collecting anything at all? And why not use private funding for?
Tushar, you got cut in the middle actually in the last sentence, I think.
Yeah, let me start. So yeah. So since the government cannot fulfill all its promises on taxation anyway, so simply get rid of it. It is just harassment or to all the individuals who are paying it. So the alternative is basically how businesses operate. You raise money, and by raising money has there are two different pathways. Whether you raise it via debt or via equity. This is how. Putting it simply, if some politician wants to start a school or some university, he will do a fundraiser, Those who are interested, they will put up the money, and those who aren't interested won't do anything, and those who put up the money will get some credit and all. So money isn't that big of an issue, and just fundraisers. And it isn't that I'm talking about something new, that novel, that this system hasn't existed. Politicians raise money all the time. It isn't a big deal for them to raise money. It's just that they right now the system is that they raise money to get a greater chunk of the taxes and to raise taxes. What we are saying is that no, that taxation level money that you raise via fundraising. So, but one thing that needs to be noted, and although this may sound impractical, is that right now there is a huge scales problem. Right now, we have mega countries like USA, China, and India, which have large population, 500 million plus population. The question arises that how will you operate in such big territories? And so the answer is that we should move the system towards decentralization, where your city or your town is the most important political unit. What ends up happening is that when you have strong city states like Singapore or Dubai and all, their issues, first of all, they aren't a threat to their neighbors, because their scope of fighting is very limited. Secondly, since the feedback is much faster in these smaller units, they can adapt to the environment very quickly. So, in an indirect way, their taxation policy or their money collection policy essentially becomes that we want to get into power to get this thing done, and it actually gets done. There is a huge scale issue in democracy, that we have wrongly scaled democracy in India and USA. That's why all these large debt problems and all the epic level of mismanagement that we are facing right now. These are structural issues arising out of over centralization.
So India can actually dream of a country that's totally free from like an oppressive nature or an authoritarian nature of things, right? They can kind of make their own decisions within their own ecosystem and live in peace, without that is kind of the premise of what you're saying, right?
I'm audible?
Now you are, yes.
Wait a minute, let me.
You can move your camera a little down so that your head is a little more.
Yes, now it's better.
Yeah, much better. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah. So what were we talking about?
Yeah. So right now I'm going to close this episode so we can go to the next 5 questions. All right, thanks Tushar for joining us, and thank you for answering these questions. And it's great to see that the future in India could be much different than anyone expects. So for all you viewers out there, be sure to watch episode 2, which is coming up next, where we'll ask 5 more questions to Tushar, and let's see how that goes. Until then, true freedom awaits. Good night. Okay, so I'm going to stop this recording, and then I'm going to, do another recording.